Okay. Hi everybody, my name is Jacob and I use he and him pronouns and I'm a wellbeing practitioner at OTR.
My name's Kiva, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm also part of the wellbeing practitioner team Off the Record.
Cool, so we're here today as part of the wellbeing practitioner takeover of the Hub. And part of the reason we've taken over today is because it's autumn, it's time for a start of a new school or college term, and obviously there's been quite a lot of disruption to that recently, and a lot of uncertainty around going back, and there's been the whole thing with exam marks. And so basically we're here to have a bit of a chat about your mental health and going back to school or college and what some of the options are for support.
Yeah, definitely. So we thought we'd kind of kick off the discussion by just having a quick think about what actually might be really important for you lot to be aware of and know about accessing mental health support. So yeah, Jacob, are there any kind of key things that you think is good to just let people know about?
Yeah, so basically the first thing to say is that you have some rights around the mental health support that you can access. So the first thing to say is we have these things called the 4 C's, and they're choice, consent, confidentiality, and also your right to kind of give compliments and make complaints. So the really important thing is that whatever mental health support you reach out for or you engage in, that it is your choice to do that and that you don't feel pressured by anybody else to do that. And you've made that decision and you're happy making that decision. And the other thing is that actually, ideally, you might have a bit of choice about what kind of support you reach out for. So for example, at OTR, wellbeing practitioners like Kiva and I, we offer CBT kind of based work. We also offer in other places of OTR some kind of more sort of psychotherapeutic talking spaces. So the idea is that you get a choice. Maybe Kiva, you've got a bit more to add to kind of what actually happens when you do reach out for support.
Yeah, so those kind of 4 C's should exist and be kind of present whether you access support at school or whether you access support through Off the Record. And I think one of the big key ones to bear in mind is that kind of right to confidentiality, which is a really kind of long word, but it basically just means when you go and ask for support or some sort of help with anything, is that it's your kind of private space, and that the information that you share with, whether that's someone at OTR, like a wellbeing practitioner, or even a teacher, is that information should be kind of kept private between you and that other person. So if you have any worries or concerns about asking for help and that help, your worries being shared with somebody else, then that's your rights kind of being broken in those situations. So it should be a really private space for you. Now there are certain situations where we might need to share some information that you've said, but that's only when there's some sort of emergency or we're really worried about you being some sort of serious risk. Other than that, it's your space to kind of bring whatever's going on for you, and kind of hopefully you feel really relaxed and able to talk about things in those environments. So yeah, there's kind of, those should blanket out across any kind of support that you want to access, both in school and Off the Record as well. Yeah, just thinking about what some of those worries might be. I mean, I know that we've been having a few discussions, Jacob, and there's been quite a lot of thing about kind of grades and falling behind and stuff like that. Is that something that you've seen a lot of when working with people?
I think it's I think getting sort of results is something that I've seen from working with people over the summer. And obviously there's been maybe it's even more stressful than normal just because of our, the kind of exam season was so disrupted by the whole coronavirus thing. And then I think also maybe I've spoken with some young people who are quite apprehensive about going back into school and making that transition. And actually this is something I can speak from my own experience as well, is that actually, some of us, we've all kind of got used to maybe not being in school or working from home. And our daily lives have been looking quite different for quite a long time. And going back into school or college, or going back into sort of doing the job in person, like we might be, there's going to be quite a big change there. And, going back into a sort of sociable environment where there are other people around us. And, it might be that you had friends at school who you haven't seen for ages, or you haven't really been in touch with, and maybe you're experiencing some sort of social anxiety around that. What would it be like when you see all these people again? Maybe you feel like you've grown and changed quite a bit as a person over the last few months, and who are you going to be when you get back to school? So there's a big, there is quite, it feels like there's quite a lot of change on the horizon that we're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, and that's really anxiety provoking, isn't it? I think a lot of the time when we're feeling anxious about things, it's because we are often kind of predicting what's going to happen in the future, or we're getting really preoccupied by something that's happened kind of in the past. We're not often very present. And I guess that, we've lived with such a time recently with so much uncertainty that it's now even more uncertain when we're going back to school. And I think I remember always getting the kind of preschool jitters and feeling a bit like, nervy about going back to school in the new school year. And that was without having to navigate this whole wider situation that we've all been going through. So.
Yeah, I think this is a really hard time of the year always. And I think it's particularly difficult this year. Yeah.
There's been another other worries and stuff that people might have is just having the ability to have your attention, for a full school day. I think that's something that definitely takes a lot of practice to kind of build up, is being able to sit in those classrooms and be able to really be on it and paying full attention from kind of, 9 a.m, sometimes earlier for some people, to 3:30, 4 o'clock. That's a big ask. And, I know there's already worries about falling behind in school. So that's definitely something that will be coming up as well, I'm sure.
Definitely. And I think school really heightens a particular difficulty when you're a young person. I was reading something recently about sleep, and basically our bodies all have our circadian rhythm, which is our natural points where we feel sleepy and wakeful. And for most adults, that's kind of like we start feeling sort of awake at about 7 in the morning sometimes, and feel sleepy at about sort of 10 or 11 at night. But actually, when you're an adolescent, your circadian rhythm pushes pushes forwards. So actually, you're naturally probably starting to feel sleepy much later on in the night, and you're naturally waking up much later on in the morning. And so I read a really powerful thing that basically said, thinking about this from an adult's perspective, when you're asking a young person to get up to go to school in the morning at 7 o'clock, that's like somebody asking you to get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning.
Gosh, no chance.
And when you're trying to, when you're a young person and your parents are saying, it's 9 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock, go to bed. That's like asking them to go to bed at like 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening, which is like no chance they'd feel sleepy then. So I think something that's happened as a result of working from home and doing school stuff at home is that probably quite a lot of our sleep, for quite a lot of us, our sleep patterns have changed a bit. And I don't know if you've got anything to add in the comments below about how your sleep patterns has changed. We'd love to hear about that. It'd be really interesting. And so I think it's really important to think about how how to kind of manage that change that's going to come about in our lifestyle a bit once we start going back to school. It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, 100%. That's really interesting, actually, thinking about that natural rhythms. Like, I know, thinking back to when I was a teenager, that it was really hard to get up in those mornings. So I'm guessing for a lot of you that might be something that you might be feeling anxious about it, or you might just be feeling a bit frustrated about having to kind of get up really early again. So I mean, so if people have any of these worries, then Jacob, like any of these ones that we've listed, or even more, obviously we don't have time to go through every kind of worry that might exist right now, what do you kind of recommend for people to access some support around it?
Well, I think a really good route to accessing support mostly is to start at school. And, maybe you could have a think about, are there any particular members of staff at school that you really trust you could go to talk about, to talk to if you're struggling with stuff or you'd like to reach out for support. Your school probably have, sort of pastoral wellbeing team or a member of staff who's responsible for that. But I think it's really, the most important thing is it's about going and finding somebody who you feel you can talk to and who you trust and who you feel comfortable talking to about this stuff, because it's not always easy to talk about as much as we wish it was. So maybe that's something else that you could add in the comments below. Who would you go and talk to? Who would you recommend talking to?
And this could be someone that you've reached out to before and it went really well, and that's kind of now your kind of go-to person. Or it could be that you've never reached out to anyone before, but if you were to, then this would kind of be a good person, and we might share some of those suggestions of kind of people in terms of like if it's a teacher or family member that could be kind of helpful for people. Because yeah, I think it's also, you know, your schools should hopefully have some sort of student wellbeing support or something, but you may find that actually you've built a really close relationship up with your English teacher, say, and that doesn't mean that you can't talk to your English teacher about not feeling okay. And actually, you know, it doesn't matter who you speak to, so long as you do reach out, because then that person can then help direct you or support you to kind of get to somewhere where they're able to give you that support. And I'm sure your English teacher or whoever teacher it is will be really appreciative that you've, you know, felt brave enough, because it is a really brave thing to do, to kind of tell someone that you might need some help as well.
Definitely. I think based on my experience, I've kind of worked with people, and also from my personal experience of doing this myself, you know, it can be really scary, you know, going and talking to somebody and initiating that conversation. You know, you being the one who has to come and say out of, you know, basically come and say out of the blue, or it feels like it's out of the blue, actually, I'm not feeling so good. Can I talk to you about this? But
Yeah.
it's almost always 99.999% of the time, it feels so much better after you've done that. And it's always a good thing, really.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's good.
And those teachers, the teachers are there to make sure you're okay and to look after you, and they do really care. And you know, the chances are they probably had another young person come to them before and say that they're not feeling good or they need some help. So don't feel like you're going to overwhelm them if you do, because I'm sure that they're very used to it and are very happy to kind of support you lot. So yeah, if you, I mean, as Jacob and I said, we're kind of based in schools, the wellbeing practitioner team, and usually the best way to come and be able to talk to one of our team is to let someone at the school know that you need some support, and then they can kind of help signpost you towards us. But equally, if you don't feel comfortable going through the school, because not everybody has that person in the school that they feel really comfortable and confident talking to, then you can actually access loads of our support just through our website, which is just otrbristol.org.uk. And you can sign up for, you know, you can have a little scroll through and see all of our different services, and actually sign up by just typing your details online. So you don't even have to come in if you don't want to, you don't have to have a phone call if you don't want to, you can just sign up online, which is really helpful, especially, you know, like Jacob said, you might be feeling quite socially anxious at the moment. So that's a good way that you can try and get some support without having to do things in person necessarily. So, yeah.
And it's also worth saying that, you know, one of the results of the whole coronavirus is that a lot of our work has gone online, whereas previously maybe more of it was happening in person. And obviously you win some, you lose some. And, you know, for some people working in person is the best thing. But actually it means that, you know, if you live further out in Bristol, or you live somewhere where you'd struggle to come and meet face to face, then it might well be possible to, you know, that you're able to do some work over a Zoom call or a video call and access support that way. So hopefully at the moment, the support that's on offer from OTR is more accessible to more people. So don't be put off if you would struggle to come in person.
Yeah, and I guess adding to that is also that although it's over video call, there's no pressure to have cameras on at the moment. There's no pressure to have to communicate through your microphones. We're doing a lot of ways to help people feel able to access, because, I mean, I'm sure you agree, Jacob, at the beginning doing things over video was a bit weird and awkward. And I think, you know, that's a completely normal experience to have. So we've tried to make it able for everyone, regardless of how confident and comfortable they feel using all this kind of video tech, to be able to do it as well. So yeah, I mean, practical tips wise, Jacob, if we're kind of thinking about some things we could recommend, what's the kind of first place that we think in terms of people being able to do stuff on their own without having to come and ask people for support? What's the kind of first thing that you might think of?
So thinking about kind of things that you could have in your kind of toolbox on a day-to-day basis that you can whip out if you're struggling a bit. I think number one on my list, again, speaking from personal experience, is things around mindfulness, basically. Mindfulness is a massive topic. And I feel that every time I try to come and like define it or explain it, I miss something out, or someone comes up with something different. So I just wanted to give you an example of a little mindfulness exercise that I use quite a lot, because I find at the moment, I find myself thinking about the future and kind of worrying about stuff and kind of thinking, you know, it can even be things like, oh, am I going to be going back and doing work in person in schools, or am I going to be staying on video call? And that might affect where I'm living and all sorts of stuff. And it's really easy to be sitting there with my mind kind of unspooling, running away with me. And so something I do is just to bring myself back to actually sitting in the present, which is here I am now. Actually, everything is okay just now. So something I do is It's kind of like sometimes called like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or a kind of sensory thing. And it varies from time to time, but usually I try and think of, okay, so what are 5 things that I can see right now? So for me at the moment, there's like a cup on my desk, water glass, there's a clock, a lamp, I've got some headphones, stuff like that. And I think about the colors as well and try and look at the textures and stuff. And I think, what are 4 different things that I can touch? So I've got like wood of my desk, some paper, my headphones are really smooth, and I've got a weird radiator thing beside me, which is kind of really sort of bubbly feeling. And then maybe 3 things that I can hear. So not right at the moment, but I have been listening to your voice, Kiva, which is nice. And I can hear traffic outside and my clock is ticking. And I'd normally spend a bit more time thinking about each of these individually. And then maybe 2 things that I can smell. I'm not sure what I can smell at the moment, but I can smell some coffee, which is really good. And I think I can probably also smell some kind of outdoor stuff because I've got the window open. And then
it can also be helpful to actively bring stuff, isn't it? You could like actively light a candle or actively have some essential oils on like something that you can smell as well, isn't it?
That is a really good point. Whatever works for you and whatever you like, really.
Yeah.
And then finally, number 1 is, one thing that you can taste, which for me happens to be coffee as well. So that's just one kind of mindfulness exercise, but there are loads and loads of different more and less structured mindfulness kind of strategies out there.
Yeah, and they're really good because the whole idea is, like you were saying, Jacob, is actually about just grounding yourselves. So it's actually about getting control of your thoughts for a second and refocusing them on something that isn't all of these anxious thoughts that are going around our heads. It's actually about, where am I right now in this present moment? And it's about kind of bringing yourself down and recentering a little bit. And I know that my way of doing that is just literally just to close my eyes for as long as I need and just focus on the sounds that I can just hear around me. And you'll realise that if you're dead silent and you're just kind of sat there for 5-10 minutes just with your eyes shut or your eyes, your gaze just lowered, that you might hear like birds or cars off in the distance. And it doesn't really matter if you're somewhere really quiet or really noisy. The whole idea is that you can use it again just to stop your thoughts from getting carried away in your head and actually just thinking about what's happening in the present moment as well. So it's really good for all sorts of situations, and you don't have to close your eyes. You can just do it whilst you're sat at your desk in school or wherever you are, and it's a really good way of kind of centering yourself as well.
Yeah.
The other thing that we kind of thought about was, and we've already kind of spoke about it, was routine a little bit. And I feel like you're a bit of a routine guru, Jacob, from being on the OTR Instagram more than once talking about routine. So maybe you're a good one to run through this a little bit for people.
Yeah, I guess so. I wish I was as good at sorting it out kind of in my own life as I am at talking about it.
I mean, don't we always say that?
But yeah, so in principle, basically, there's this idea that, what we do in life has quite a major effect on our mood. And so trying to plan in some stuff that you enjoy doing is it sounds really basic, but it's a fairly surefire way of giving your mind a good chance to have some fulfilling experiences and generally help you feel better in life. And so thinking about this particular situation we've got, which is we're at kind of the end of this sort of weird at-home period, and maybe we're going back to school and stuff, maybe think back, we could maybe do some reflection on what's been going on for you during the lockdown period in the last few months. Is there anything really good that you've enjoyed doing, or maybe something new that's come out of it? Is there anything positive that come out of it that you like doing in your life? Like I've discovered that I actually quite like going out and tramping about a bit more than I realised. And maybe you can kind of pick something and try and plan that into your week once you're back at school, and you could do it once a week or twice a week. But try and hold on to something good that you've been doing and carry it on. And the idea about the routine is just that you really plan it in advance, so you know when you're going to do it, and you've maybe like taken the steps necessary to make sure it's going to happen. So if you need any specialist stuff, or you need anybody to help you make it happen, or you need help getting to a certain place, or you need any particular I suppose any sort of equipment or stuff, like even if it's as simple as like, you want to listen to half an hour of music a day, so making sure you've got your headphones and that sort of stuff. Just take those steps to make sure it happens, and ask for help from other people. That's a really powerful way of helping, making sure that stuff does happen, is telling someone else that you're planning to do it, and then asking for help from them to make it happen.
Yeah, definitely. And there's also, I guess just the more, that's like the really enjoyable parts that we can do and
Mm.
we can make sure that we plan. But there's also, as we've already discussed, there's that huge thing of like, oh my gosh, like I've all of a sudden got this really structured school timetable type stuff coming up in the future. And, you know, how can I make sure that I don't sleep in or I'm really tired and those kind of things. So we've got all these pleasurable things which are really important to plan in and think about, but there's also just the more basic routine things such as kind of sleeping, eating, showering, those kind of things. So, you know, it's even so far as we know that when we don't eat food properly and we don't have enough energy in our bodies, that our mood is much, much harder to control. That's where the whole kind of word hangry even comes from, is that idea that it's really hard to kind of keep our temper and keep our cool when we're not fed properly. So it might be that you're going to have to slowly start to ease, and maybe now is a really good time, slowly start to ease our bodies into more of a routine that we're going to have when we're kind of back at school. That might be making sure that we get up and have time to have breakfast every morning. And maybe you're going to start trying to do that 2 times a week over the next 2 weeks before you kind of are back at school. So yeah, it's about kind of just thinking about what's coming up, and then maybe we can start trying to ease ourselves back into that routine now, because equally we all know what happens if we don't have enough sleep, and that's not good either.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely. Cool. And then the last little, I guess if we kind of got 3 tips, so we've had like mindfulness, routine, and the last thing I think is really important for all of us is that idea of just being compassionate and having compassion. So what we mean by the word compassion is just kind of being kind to ourselves. So we often find ourselves being very compassionate towards other people, but as a kind of society and a culture and the people that we are, we often find that much more difficult to kind of give towards ourselves. And I think everything that everyone has been through recently with lockdown and COVID and all those worries and navigating school grades and just everything, I think now is a really important time to practice being compassionate for ourselves. And I think that's just through acknowledging how hard it's been, accepting that the situation hasn't been the best experience in the world for some of us, and actually just going easy on ourselves at this time. You know, not expecting yourself to go flying back into, you know, year 10 of school and getting straight on with things and everything going completely smoothly, or, you know, going in, starting our A levels when we've just had all this time off. I think it's about being kind and allowing our bodies and our minds and just who we are to slowly adjust. And if we're struggling, to kind of accept that and say it's okay. And one of the ways we can show compassion for ourselves is by having this kind of mantra that we would say to ourselves when we're struggling, which is just kind. And, you know, rather than maybe having negative thoughts like I'm really stupid or I'm ridiculous, I can't do this, is actually about exchanging that for something kinder. So it could be, you know, I might feel really anxious right now, but I'm in control and I'm going to be okay. Just saying kind of little things like that to ourselves. Or, you know, this experience that has happened was not my fault and I might take some time to get back to normal. Just having kind of little nods to kindness that we can use and pull out the bag. And you might want to write these down on cards, write them down in your notes on your phone, just so you can kind of pull them out when you need them. And if any of you lot have really nice ones that you want to share that we could kind of then do, I think we're going to put a little question kind of box on the next bit of the Instagram story so that you can kind of share some of your ones with us. Do you have any compassionate things that you tend to do or say for yourself, Jacob?
I think for me, I tend to remind myself that what I'm doing is probably good enough.
Yeah.
The other good enough is like, I think it's like a phrase that was coined by like a child psychotherapist back in the 60s. So it's a really interesting concept if you want to look it up, but it's basically just the idea that, simplifying it, it's just like, you know, nobody's perfect. Nobody can do everything perfectly. And it was originally about bringing up children. You know, you can't be a perfect, amazing parent the whole time, but I've adapted to my own life. I cannot be a totally amazing, perfect Jacob the whole time. In fact, that's pretty rare, to be honest. But what I can do is on a daily basis, I can keep trying just to do my best, and trust that if I, you know, have a decent go at stuff, it's going to be okay. And, you know, and it usually is. And actually that's really helpful. And that's my kind of sort of self-compassion mantra, I suppose, is, you know, that actually, you know, all I've got to be is good enough, and, you know, things will be okay. And yeah, and that kind of gives me a bit of space to ease off being tough on myself. And then, you know, that energy that otherwise would be taken and kind of beating myself up can actually go somewhere a bit more productive as well. Yes.
Yeah, I really like that. And it's really hard, isn't it? Because I think we live in a world that puts so much pressure on us being perfect and achieving the best grades and doing all the best stuff. So I think it's quite radical for us to sometimes say to ourselves, actually, I'm just going to be good enough today. Like, I don't need to do what you all want me, or I don't need to be as good as those other people. Actually, I think that's quite, that's a really radical form of self-care right there, to actually just say, I'm just going to be good enough today and I'm going to be kind to myself. And actually, that's more important than stressing myself out and worrying about something.
Yeah. I just want to give a plug actually. There's a really cool zine by Meg John Baker called Hell Yeah Self Care. And it's available online, and recommend having a reading of that. It's got some good kind of radical self-care tips in it.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. Good stuff. Great. Well, I think that kind of brings us to the end of our little chat. Maybe we can put a little, nod towards that zine that you just said on the future, on a little bit of the story as well. And I guess linking back to the mindfulness stuff, you have probably all heard of these apps before, but there's things like Headspace, which you do have to pay for, but if you're a student, then they do a very kind of heavily discounted student membership. There's also just tons of really great stuff on YouTube, like, that's totally free. And there's also a website called Smiling Mind as well, which have got it for like all the ages, entirely free. If you don't mind listening to an Australian accent, it's a good one as well. I don't know. And then in terms of the routine stuff, on OTR's page for Mind Aid, which is one of our therapeutic groups, we've got some little kind of self-help workbook type things around routine, which might be really awesome, which are completely free to download. So you lot can kind of get on trying to build in some of those kind of pleasurable and routine stuff that kind of Jacob and I have been talking about as well.
Yeah.
Any kind of parting words, Jacob, before we sign off?
I just think thank you for your time. It was really nice talking to you all.
Yeah.
And good luck, and just don't be afraid to go and ask for help and talk to people, and communicate is the key. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Good luck, everyone. It will be okay. You're all really brave, really strong, and you're all amazing to have even got this far amongst all this crazy. So, yeah.
Cool.
Amazing stuff. Cool. See ya.
Bye for now.